Hello there, and welcome back to the Closet Historian and back to my sewing parlor, where I'm afraid I've been keeping a little secret from you. And that is, while I finish the stenciling on 3 of the walls in this room, well, the big wall behind me and the 2 arched walls that the camera is sitting in, and to my left, the wall to my right, I never quite finished up the stenciling. I had this little narrow strip above the wall of windows over here that I never quite got to. After doing this many layered stencil for the border on the rest of the room, I kind of ran out of steam, especially because I was going to have to cut new stencils, needed to order new stencil film, the whole shebang. So did it take me over a year to finally finish up this last wall in this room? Yes, but that's what our goal is today. So let me go ahead and show you how I got on with the stenciling, and then of course make some window treatments for these 3 main windows. Similar to the Victorian style lambrequin that I made in the entry room behind you, I am going to be making some more Pelmets, lambrequins, valances, whatever we want to call them, for the windows in here. Although I have 3 in a sort of, a shallow bay window here, which allows me to create an even more dramatic effect in this room. But seeing as I haven't started these yet, and I know I'm going to be sewing a lot of trim onto velvet by hand, I'd better go ahead and get started. So while I was working on this room over a year ago, I did go ahead and paint the trim around the windows, but I had not painted the windows themselves. I guess the wood around the windows. I do have old 1890s windows. As far as I know, these are the original windows. They do have wavy glass in them still, and I love them dearly. However, each will need to be restored one day, and they have been painted several times by past owners. And in several cases around my home, including a couple of these, they have been painted or even nailed shut, which doesn't actually bother me too much because even if I could get these open, there is an additional 1970s storm window on the outside of these about 3 inches away. So my first order of operations was to go ahead and finally paint the window frames themselves, the onyx black that I used for the trim in my house, and I roped my mom into helping me with that and also painting the radiators in here, again onyx black, on her last visit in May. Yes, it's true. I never finished the stenciling above the windows in here, so I'm doing it now, over a year later. And you can see I still have this little strip that will be an interesting project for some time. This is many layers, of course, and I have about half of them up. I did these little blocks that will be gold with separate finials above the window block here, and that's because I did it over the keystones on the other side of the room. And I thought it would be a good way to not have to perfect the repeat because it wasn't going to match up here and here. There was no way that was going to perfectly align. So I had to figure out a way to break it up. So I just centered a moth in between each of these and mirrored it along that in between these gold finial blocks. So that's how we're making that work. But I still have to do the gold color on all the areas that need to be gold on the design as well. Stencil that, then put the metallic gold on top of everything that needs to be metallic gold, and then the black accents after that. And of course, this is all just a prelude to be making the lambrequins for these front windows as well. Here you can see what I mean. So above the keystone on my archways here, this is the arch into the salon foyer. I have the center arch finial thing painted metallic gold with a blue design on it. And that's the same as I will do over above the windows. And no, the ceiling in here was not very fun to paint, but it is very fun now. And I have a very coordinating kimono on display here in the salon currently, and a pile of stuff that needs to find a home. But I do need to eventually do the ceiling in here as well, which I have a different plan for, but it's gonna be such a pain in the neck, literally. And as hesitant as I had been about cutting new stencils and finishing up this narrower area, it was actually much easier to work with smaller stencils. And as nice as it is to use a large stencil and get a big swath done at once while working on larger motifs like this, I think moving forward what I have learned is that it's actually easier to use smaller stencils and be able to go around the room quickly and repeat things fast. By the time you get around, the first side is probably dried, and the hassle of really large stencils is probably just not worth it. And because this was a smaller area and I wasn't burnt out on stenciling, I was able to take my time, go slowly, and actually enjoy this process much more than I had by the time I was finished stenciling the rest of the room. Please forgive me for the air conditioner droning background noise, but it's supposed to be very warm today, and I'm going to be working in here with velvet, so all extra frustration due to temperature must be removed as much as possible. But all the stenciling along the top of these windows is complete. Except for this one little strip right here that I need to fill in. But the main point of it is done. So now I'm going to start making the lambrequins, and I of course have a very official sketch to work from. And that official sketch is as you can see right here. So the plan here is to do, you know, this kind of thing here. Can you focus? There you go. To do slightly, like one in the center that is kind of symmetrical, and then the two either side will be a little bit different, so that kind of arcs gently and looks sort of fantasy-tastic. And I'm going to be making this out of black upholstery velvet. It's not the world's plushest velvet ever, but it is nice and thick, so hopefully that will work out. And I have some trims and some tassels, of course, and then I will suspend these things from inside the window frames, which are now thankfully onyx black, which really helps with the situation. And again, I would actually love to remove this film and put up lace curtains, but I'm not positive if that will work out with the amount of sun filtering I need in this room, because again, the cut table is right here. I need a lot of sun diffusion, light diffusion coming into this room, because I'm always filming in here and I can only do so much with my lighting. Although eventually, because I'm a night owl, luckily all of the light comes under my control when the sun actually sets. And we have a little Moopin. Hello, Sophia. Yeah, it's a bag of lace from Mood, my love. It's from Mood, sweet cheeks. I did actually grab this cotton, I think it's a wall from Mood. And I've had my eye on this one for a long time, and they were having a sale on lightweight cotton. But this has bugs made out of bugs printed on voile. This is actually the back side. I can't find the front for you. I need to pre-wash this. It's a very warm vanilla color. But, I mean, digital print of beetles made into beetles. It's just gonna be the perfect summer dress for me, where it's like, looks frothy and cute until you get up close and you realize it's a little bit creepy. Perfect. And as my first step after sketching and ideation for making window treatments like this, I like to cut paper to fit the window opening. That way I can test out my ideas in life-size form. And I wanted to keep the general shape on these windows much more in line with the other archways around the ground floor of my home, including the arched windows in the stairwell and the large arches in the rest of the room. Okay, so I have pieces of paper cut and folded that are the 31 inches wide and about 60 inches long. These are 72-inch long windows, so that I can sketch out my design up on said windows to see if I like it, to make a pattern, etc. Now, these little zones, these little archways, which again are mirroring the Gothic, well, not Gothic arches, more like Romanesque arches in the rest of my house. I know I want at least like a 4-inch wide bit along the side, that this probably in the center needs to be around that. So I subtracted 4 inches 3 times from the main thing and ended up with a 9.5-inch diameter circle to create the top of the archways here. So I cut out some bits of 4-inch wide paper and some circles to be able to start mocking up what the general shape here needs to be. The way I'm deciding how long this needs to be is I took one of my tassels and I hung it with a little bit of buffer above the center of the window, because of course these are sash windows. And I don't want it to like interact with the middle. Like, I could have it come down lower, but then the most of this is going to be covered, so this is about where it has to be. So I'm basing everything off of that, basically. So I have these pieces to decide how long I want the side bits. These are of course going to be completely asymmetric. It will be mirrored on the other side to create this like arching situation. This here might be a good thumbnail actually. But I'm going to go ahead and transfer this information that I have from playing around with the bits over here on this window onto these pieces to see if I like this, and then I can go ahead and of course move on to fabric, which look like this. And of course this one will have the design mirrored, and it kind of cascades up, not super dramatically, just a subtle kind of curve hidden in here. This seems a little bit thick at the top here, but I can always fold it under more if I need to, and it will be tucked inside the window a little bit more than these paper versions are, so I think actually that should be okay. If anything, I might add an inch onto the tails just to make sure that if I do end up tucking that up a bit further, they still hang down between like beyond this midpoint of the sash window. But that's the current plan as it stands. I need to go ahead and try and make this first one out of the cotton. I'm going to use a cotton shirting because I have a bunch of it and it was cheap. A cotton twill and then the upholstery velvet on top of that. So I'm going to start going ahead and replicating this in fabric. I did go ahead and make the first lambrequin off camera as a proof of concept, and as you can see, I received a lot of assistance with that process. Okay friends, what happened here was I finished this center one, like, I don't know, 10 days ago, more than that. And then I realized that my windows are tall. So when I bought 3 yards of fabric, I was thinking, oh, these are surely only gonna be 36 inches long max, right? But these tails on the end pieces are longer than that. So I realized quickly that I didn't have enough fabric, which also meant I didn't have enough trim, and I had to wait for both of those things to arrive before I could continue, and therefore the video schedule got rejigged, and here we are. So I was able to take a little bit of a break from this project, and then today and yesterday, I went ahead and I made the second one here. I did also change up how I'm hanging the tassel, and I've added a large wooden bead just to kind of finish that off a little bit more. And the second one is now finished, and I got that up there. This one I did have to actually drill into the window surround, unfortunately, because it was a tiny bit too small. I mean, it was the exact size it needed to be, but you actually want these to be, like, I use a piece of wood up here that I wrap the curtain around, and it's better to have the piece of wood be the exact measurement it needs to be to slide up in there, and then the fabric along the sides adds just enough puff to the outside that you can hold it in there with just tension, which is how this one is held in there. I actually had to knock it up in there into place with a rubber mallet, but this one, it was a little, I cut the wood a little bit too short, so even with the cushion, it was the perfect size as opposed to a little bit too big, which is kind of how you want it to end up. Hopefully that makes any sense. So I did have to actually drill this up in there, which is a shame, but as predicted, these are taking a long time to make because there is a lot of hand sewing involved. And here's what this looks like up close. You can see the trim on the window and parts of the window are curved. So focus, camera. So this is straight across the piece of wood that I'm putting in there, but the window itself is curved. And I do have trim on these buddies, and of course this is a window film for privacy. And I actually, because these long tails, you don't want them to flop around, I actually have these held in place with tacks. So I just have these with like corkboard tacks. I've positioned these so that they don't move around. You could also use Velcro or just even like staple or nail them in if you were really concerned about it. But that's how this is going over here. This is how the trim is coming out. And here are these tassels that I also picked up from Deco Pro, which is where this trim is from as well. This trim is from Deco Pro. I will link it below. But then these tassels are from Deco Pro, but the cord on the tassel is very thin. So what I've done here is I'm bulking it up with a bit of rope cord and then sticking it through the bead just to give this a little bit more visual weight. And I think it's working out well. So I still have to fix up the tassel on the central buddy here, and then of course make the last pelmet slash valance slash whatever we're calling these, lambrequin. And while these are taking me ages to make, unsurprisingly, I do think it's going to be worth it, and I do think it's fun to have it kind of slightly arch upwards, so each of these little arches kind of climbs up the side, and then the center one is the same. So it's a little bit asymmetric, and it will be a little bit arched from far away in the end here. And of course, normally I don't have light pointed at the window, so you can't really see the trim unless you're kind of in person. And it definitely like just becomes silhouetted as soon as I turn the lights away. But the idea here, of course, is that the light is then creating just the silhouette of the shapes in the window, which I think is quite fun. So I will go ahead and walk you through my making of the last lambrequin. Now that I've made a few of these, I've finally kind of honed in on my process. Now, of course, best practice would be to buy cotton twill that actually matches the color of the window treatment you're making, but I've just been trying to use up extra cotton twill in my stash in order to keep costs down. So for the 2 side lambrequins, I ended up going with this brushed navy cotton twill that I had in my stash. This does have no stretch and is a nice medium to heavy weight twill. I took my paper template down from the window, added seam allowance, made sure I had a good 2 inches on the sides and the top to be able to fold over and stick this into the window with a bit of overlap. Then again, to conserve fabric, I did add a center seam on the interior layers of this. The last velvet layer will have no seams, but for this interior stability layer, I did have a seam running down the center of each lambrequin. So I seamed both this twill layer, and then I did cut out an additional lining layer as well to be able to finish the edges of this by bag lining it. And that was a lighter weight cotton twill shirting that I used for that with a subtle stripe. This fabric is actually on sale over at Mood. I picked some up just to see what it was like because it was so inexpensive. And it is a little bit thicker than I was expecting for clothing, but it worked perfectly for this project. But yes, once I had the left and right pieces sewn together in both the twill and the lining, I lined those up right sides together and stitched them together, leaving a small opening up along the top edge. That way I could clip all my curves, turn this right side out, and give it a nice press. And in order to keep things as smooth as possible, that's the last of the machine stitching that I used on these lambrequins. From now on, I will be hand stitching the rest of the process. I laid the velvet out as smooth as I could across the green table, placed this finished sort of lining stability piece on top of that, cut out the velvet with a bit of seam allowance along the top and sides again that I will fold in on itself and whip stitch to the edges of the finished under layer. And I actually cut about a 1/4 inch off around the inside curved edge so that the cut edge of the velvet will be hidden by trim around the inside curved edges of my lambrequin. I then went around and hand felled this cut edge down onto the finished layer beneath, and did a modified sort of blanket stitch along either side, folding the velvet in on itself along the finished edge of the lined underpiece. Once I had the velvet essentially appliqued down onto the rest of my lambrequin, I went ahead and applied my trim, which of course will cover the cut edge of the velvet and also reinforce this area, because I will go ahead and stitch through not just the trimming and the top layers, but all the way through all 3 layers of the lambrequin at certain points just to help keep this flat and smooth. And of course, trying my best as I do this by hand to keep the tension correct so that I'm not pulling too hard or leaving things too loose, so that I can keep my lambrequin as smooth as possible. I did do all of this by hand while standing and keeping the pelmet, the lambrequin, as smooth as possible here atop the table, which did mean by the end of the day my feet were killing me. But you know, it's worth it to have very spoopy window treatments, is it not? After all, I am trying to imbue my home with the spirit of Halloween every day of the year. Now I will go ahead and link the upholstery velvet I used, this was from moodfabrics.com, as well as this trim, which is from a company called Deco Pro. They ship super quickly, their trims are extremely inexpensive compared to most upholstery trims and home decor trimmings, and I have found that the quality is super consistent and works great for any purpose I have yet required. I also ordered the tassels I will use on these window treatments from them as well, and in general I would just say that Deco Pro has always met or exceeded my expectations. These are just my opinions and are not sponsored in any way, of course, as usual. Once I had this trim pinned down into place as I would like it, I did pull some of the threads out of the braid just to fill in the corners. When I had a very sharp turn, that's one way you can kind of manipulate the trim, luckily, to fill in those bits. Just do be careful because it's very easy to pull parts of this trim too far, and then you kind of have to just tack it back down into place. With a trim made up of this many yarns, you can really easily hide your stitching, so no trouble there if things get out of control, just do be careful. But once I have this positioned into place, I'm going to whip stitch all along this inside edge. Then I will add a second line of stitching along the top cording of this thread, tacking that down every centimeter or so, every ½ inch or so, tacking that through all 3 layers every few stitches just to make sure everything stays as flat and smooth as possible. And for the finishing touch on these, I did want to, of course, hang a tassel from the center of the 2 arches on each lambrequin. The actual hanging cord on these tassels, though, is rather wimpy compared to the rest of the trimmings going on here, so I did want to bulk that up with a little bit of the nylon and cotton cord. This is probably a 5mm or 6mm cord. I don't remember it, but you get the general idea. I cut a length of that to bulk up the cord on this, just stitching all that together. Again, the stitches are basically invisible if you're using the same color of thread, so I can basically just go to town here with rough stitch work, making things look as I would like. I then slid on a large wooden bead just to give this another finishing touch, position the tassel in place where I would like it, and then whip stitch this to the back of the curtain. And with the window treatment complete, I just need to fold in either side 2 inches and give this a quick press. I'm using very little pressure on my iron, of course, because this is a velvet. Even if it is a very dense velveteen, I don't want to mess up the pile of this velvet, the nap at this point. It's not a very long pile on this velvet, but I still am being cautious, mostly using steam as opposed to using pressure on the iron. And using a muslin press cloth, as you can see, just as an extra precaution. This extra side width is what actually sticks into the window itself and curls around the edge so that light doesn't peek through along the sides. And with the lambrequin finished, I will go ahead and attach that to a piece of 1x2. Using a little powered staple gun that I have for upholstery projects here at the house, I am just going to fold this over the top edge of my 1x2 that again is cut to the size of the window opening. I will staple the length across the top, and then once I get to the corners, I will wrap the corners like I'm wrapping a gift. And the extra layers of fabric giving a lot of bulk to the ends of this is what allows for the window treatment to be just too large for the window. The wood is cut to size, but the fabric makes it too big. But the fabric is squishable, so now I just have a slightly padded, perfectly sized pelmet that I can stick up into the window frame where I want it. And because it is now such a tight fit due to the bulk of the fabric, I will use a rubber mallet to bang this up into place at the top of the window opening. Is this a little bit violent? Probably, but less so than drilling or nailing anything into my old windows. And squishing these in here this way does mean all these need to come down is an equally brutal tug in the future. All right, the third one is done and it is up. We can see the sort of arch that this creates here. Of course, I'm standing at an angle to this whole thing, so you can kind of see the edge of the front outer part of the window, but you can see that this kind of arches up and around. This piece is mirrored to this piece. All of the things have their trimmings. I actually still have to fix this last tassel. I'm just realizing I've got these ones on the thicker cord, but I haven't threaded this one through with the thicker cord yet, so I'll have to finish that up. But you can see what this looks like. All done, and with the paintwork done up here as well. I do have one tiny bit of paintwork left to do right here, and probably should touch up there as well. But I'm going to be soon, well, soon-ish, painting the ceiling in this room. So when I do that, I'll have all the colors out again, And I can touch up that last little bit. It's definitely better than it was over here on this corner. A lot more going on, especially because the radiators are finally painted as well, which looks much better than the sad off-white color that they were before. I do hope to not only paint the ceiling in this room, but also create a sort of radiator cover slash cat bench along this curved window. So I've yet to figure out exactly what I want to do with that. And then I may even make a new version of the camera trellis that hides the cords from the lights better, because currently they're just wound around this buddy, and I think we could do a little better. So there are still some upgrades to be made to this room, but I do feel good about finally having the window treatments done and up like so. I would eventually love to actually upgrade from this faux leaded glass film to more lace curtains from Cooper's Lace, my favorite source for lace curtains, even though I only own one of them. I want to save up for some more. Maybe next year I can go ahead and add in some lace panels on these windows as well. But for now, since I spend so much time in this room and I actually really do need the light to be diffused since I'm filming all the time in here, and controlling lighting is hard enough without the sun doing strange things outside, I do need some sort of diffusion or film, something going on those windows, so it'll be staying for now. I hope you enjoyed seeing this last secret corner of the sewing parlor come together, and thank you so much for watching today. And a huge additional thank you to my patrons who make all of my work and these videos possible. And as always, I'll be back with more sewing, vintage fashion, costuming, crafting, and decorating real soon, so I'll see you then. Bye.